Good morning, everybody. I'm Vincenzo Calla, president of the Ontario High School Conservative Association, and I'm glad that you are able to join us today. Today, we are glad to have the MPP for Northumberland, Peterborough South joining us, David Piccini. David first started in the Federal Public Service, where he worked at Agriculture Canada and Service Canada. He moved on to work at the office of the Minister of International Trade, the Honourable Ed Fast, when he was obviously the minister during the Harper government. In 2015, David joined the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, where he provided strategic advice on policy. David was first elected as MPP in the 2018 election, and he currently serves as the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Training, Colleges, and Universities. Thank you, David, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Vincenzo. Great to be with you.
We're glad to have you here today, and we always like to start off the interview with the question and answer segment. And every single question from this segment comes from our high school students, our high school members, and our teams.
Awesome.
So question 1 comes from Evan in Ottawa. It's a pretty simple question. What's your favorite part about being an MPP?
Well, my favorite part about being an MPP has to be that every single day is different. And getting to represent such a diverse community as Northumberland, Peterborough South, it's a rural riding, 3 distinct regions, 2 First Nations communities, and just no day is the same. On one day, you're sitting around the table with a bunch of farmers out on a farm talking about some issues with respect to the agricultural sector, or most recently, for example, meat processing, in a COVID-19 pandemic, to just today and this morning we were standing up a mobile vaccine clinic. So working on the logistics of rolling out a mobile vaccine clinic on the front lines in an industrial park, supporting our manufacturing sector. So every day is different. I love the people in the community. And I mean, you have to be a social person. You have to like getting out there. And I just love that every day is different. And I quite literally am in school again, just hands-on every day, doing something different. And I just love it. So it's got to be the favorite part of being an MPP.
Well, we've interviewed some of your colleagues before. I mean, we recently interviewed Lisa Thompson, Minister Lisa Thompson. We've interviewed so many of your colleagues, and we hear a lot. And even when we interview our federal conservative friends, our MPs and such in the federal Conservative Party, we see that the job of an MP or an MPP or whatever level of politics you're in is public service, and that's what you're there for. You serve as the MPP, as the representative of the people in your riding, and you get to every single day wake up and think, what am I going to do today? I'm going to serve the people of my community in the House, in the legislature, or I'm going to be out on a farm talking with some of my constituents about what they can do for meat processing, or those sort of ideas that you're sort of speaking about.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And, the service element is really key. When I got elected, so many people at the door said, we're sick and tired of you politicians every 4 years. You see them first and foremost. I mean, I think I was one of the first ever politicians to run down driveways in rural Ontario that are a kilometer long and get out to those second, third, and fourth line roads. And I really take it seriously that, representing not just the folks who have the good fortune of being able to have a highly paid activists and others advocate for them, and they have an important role as well. But for mums and dads, everyday Ontarians that are busy working 1-2 jobs, just trying to put food on their table and juggling the demands of being a parent, of being a caregiver in many respects, and they don't have time to hang out midday and at an MPP's office. So it's really about going to them. So I've really tried to take this job and upend it a little more virtual. I've run virtual town halls in a number of the ridings. I do pop-up offices, clinics. We're on the road a lot, so actually I'm not in the office very often. And that's the riding's bigger than Belgium, so that's you got to be out in the road if you're really going to know what's going on in the various communities that represent Northumberland, Peterborough South. So love every day, and very much tell the staff and the team here, it's a service element. You are my boss, not the other way around.
Exactly, and we speak about that with so many people. I've
Mhm.
talked with, you're my 21st interview, so I've talked with 20 other MPs and MPPs and candidates, and we always talk about how the people get to hire you as their MPP and they get to choose. And it's great that there's MPPs like yourself who are revitalizing the role of the MPP or of the MP, that are just going out and doing things that MPs in the past may not have done. Like you said, going out on the road and knocking on doors when it's not election time. That's
Mhm.
very surprising to many people. I've seen a couple of MPs and MPPs and all that, that they go, that especially in Ottawa, there was a councillor, I think, that was like going door knocking to like hand out COVID information and stuff. And it's interesting to see how people react to politicians coming to their door when it's not election time. And I know that that helps them understand that their MPP or representative is working for them. So the second question comes from Jerry in Brampton, and he asks, "What do you think is the biggest challenge your constituents face besides COVID-19?"
Well, I mean, it's tough not to loop COVID-19 into this. I think that's the question, is they want their lives back, and people are so eager to put COVID-19 behind us. But I would say one of the biggest challenges we have right now is a housing issue. We're an hour east of Toronto, so if you come out on the 401 and before you hit the Big Apple's in my riding in Colborne, can't miss it. But Newcastle, and as you head east, Port Hope, Coburg, then onwards to the Big Apple, and eventually Brighton. The housing market and COVID has exacerbated that. So I promise that's the last I'll mention of COVID in that. But the housing market has been a big issue. And when I got elected, I really wanted to make sure that this community was more than just some bedroom sleeper community of Toronto, because we've got so much going on in this slice of paradise out in rural Ontario, and I want to be a community where people can live, work, and raise a family. So for me, one of the biggest issues, as I said, is housing and getting a roof over someone's head, and making sure it's affordable, and that's the key. So we're working with municipalities. I mean, the endless permitting process, the months, years it takes to get even the smallest renovations going. So we're working with that. We've launched More Homes, More Choice. We've done some amazing affordable housing builds in my community, over $5 million project in Coburg, and really trying to give people, the dignity of a leg up and getting on with their life and supporting them with it. And navigating our complex web of supports is complicated at the best of times. So making sure it's seamless, helping people get a leg up, and that starts with a roof over their head, and get the training for a job. And I'll talk more with you, I'm sure, about the role in colleges and universities, but we're doing so much in that ministry to help people pivot, to upskill, to get a better job. And ultimately that's what it's all about. I mean, I look in the back room, in the background of your screen right now, and you've got some formative conservatives who've really, it boils down quintessentially to things instilled with me at a young age, the respect and the dignity of getting up early, putting in a good day's work, and supporting people with that. And that housing element is so key. And so, everything I do, I try and tie into just building a better community that people can live, work, and play right here in Northumberland, Peterborough South.
And that's exactly it. And you mentioned a lot of good things. First of all, next time that I'm driving to Toronto, it'll be a while. Hopefully I can go back, though. I like going to Toronto, but obviously COVID's put a halt on that. I'll remember that you're the MP of the Big Apple when I
Drop
drive
in.
by that.
Yeah.
Definitely. And like you said, it's about really serving your community and making sure that they can afford a house. I mean, we know federally we've seen a lot. My next door riding of I'm in Nepean, so next door is Carleton, and Goldie Gamari's the MPP there, but the MP Pierre Poilievre, he's been talking a lot about the housing crisis as well, and so many other people are raising these concerns, and it really is something that we need to work at. And like you said, in your role as the parliamentary assistant to Minister of Colleges, University Training, mouthful, but it's okay.
Yeah.
You get to sort of see the youngest people that are in university, and then you're sort of seeing, now what? They're out of university and they're expected to buy a home with so much, which is so expensive now, or expected to build a home where the materials cost so much. We see the prices of lumber, they're skyrocketing. And it's again back to what you were saying about being an MPP, getting up early. Like when we were talking with Andrew Shear, it was before I had this poster up, but we talked about how Margaret Thatcher always said we need to wake up earlier than the socialists and get ready and start working before they do.
Yeah,
And
it's true, and we do.
yeah, you need to work. Well, it's even more prevalent to you because you're sitting across from the NDP is sitting across from you, but that's besides the point. I did not intend to bring that in when I was talking about Margaret Thatcher, but happy coincidence. But as we see, you need to like these it's these issues that you need to work on as an MPP, and the people of your community come to you with them, and then you get to bring them to the legislature. And whether you're going to turn it into legislation or just raise a comment about it in the House, it's something interesting to talk about and see what your constituents are facing. So
Yeah.
number 3 is more of a specific question, but it's more of a discussion-based question. I know you, Mackenzie wanted me to ask, do you think that elementary schools will resume as normal once all the teachers are vaccinated as we go back this next year?
Yeah, Vincenzo, I do without question. I mean, I really do feel strongly that 14 months into the pandemic, we have taken lessons learned as a government. Without question, the global pandemic has caught, sorry to be blunt, but I think it's caught governments worldwide a bit with their pants down in terms of pandemic response. And it has been frustrating. You know, we had no pandemic response ready. We had expired, PPE. I always, I genuinely find it shocking and do joke at times with my liberal colleagues on how you, after SARS, MERS, H1N1, can you just let PPE expire and become so dependent on China? It's just unbelievable. But having said that, through this pandemic, I think we've learned lessons learned. You know, Ontario Together, the Made in Ontario logo now, and seeing, manufacturing in my own community and knowing the workers that are making it, be it the hand sanitizer that I've got right here, be it, the dog treats that I've got in my office for my dog, again, made in Ontario by an Indigenous small business in my own riding. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud Premier Ford's putting really Ontario manufacturing, Ontario jobs first. And I think going back to school is key, and we must. It's an economic imperative as much as it is a social one for students. You're a future, you're the engine that's going to drive our economy. And while I think, we've had to be prepared with the online piece and want to make sure that it is there if need be in the fall, we really do have to look at opportunities. I know, having conversations with boards about thinking outside the box for graduations and trying to bring in students to have some sort of dynamic. And it's really about getting all partners together and encouraging them to think outside the box in a pandemic era. But yes, I do think with the vaccine, with the efficacy, we know, the hospitalizations and the severity of COVID has diminished with vaccine. I just got my first dose the other day. And so this is a good thing. And we fully expect a return to in-person learning, but not just that. Sports, extracurriculars, clubs. I mean, that's so important. Sitting through school, high school, I'll never forget Wednesdays. It was knowing that soccer game was happening that night. Wednesdays, Thursdays, that got me going through those long hours into your afternoon classes. And so, I think that's an imperative as well. And I do fully expect that to happen in September. And we're working hard to make sure we're making the investments to make sure it's safe.
Well, exactly. And we've seen a lot of outrage, as with everything. I mean, we've seen in this pandemic that a lot of people have been outraged, and that's a part of it. People don't like government in their lives in every single day aspect of it. I mean, that's why Ontario voted for the PC party, because we're a government, we're a party that believes in not so much intrusive government in your life and that sort of idea. But it's hard during the pandemic, but we can see that kids hopefully can go back to school and people will be able to function as normal. And I know that the provincial government's been working extremely hard, but it's been difficult dealing with the federal government with the, how do you say it, with the challenges about vaccine procurement. It is hard to, when it is a multi-tiered system where the government, federal government is getting the vaccines and then the provincial government has to roll them out. Luckily, it's been starting to ramp up and it's been a bit better, and Ontario's vaccine plan is good. But it really is something that we need to hopefully see kids back in school. Hopefully for my grade 12 year, I'll be in school next year and it'll be great.
Yeah, and you touch a bit on a dichotomy between those who believe in small government and government getting out of the way, and really that leg up and creating the conditions. But ultimately, it's business and it's a community that creates that economic driver. So it is a dichotomy. You're right. And when we're in these difficult measures, massive government regulation restrictions, it is very difficult. But I do think that we have a lot that we can be proud of, that we've stood up again after 15 years and a massive deficit, the largest sub-sovereign, debt in the world. And what do we have to show for it? My hospital was more crowded than ever. Long-term care homes. I mean, you might be active with grandparents, but I think to caring for my own as well. I mean, walking into these homes, it's like flashback to the 60s, 70s before I was even born. And so what was done? So we've got in my community alone, everywhere I drive now, you've got big signs up on new builds for long-term care. And it's not just a new building, but it's the modern space. It's the dignity of that worker who deserves a new place and not these dreary bunker style 60s Soviet style buildings. Like it's architecture from an era long ago, and it's not up to AODA, it's accessibility legislation. It's not up to modern standards either. So residents deserve it, staff deserve it, and I think as a community, we've as a government have a lot to be proud of. But I am looking forward to the engine of this economy unleashing that potential. And it's not me, and it's not Premier Ford, and it's not government. It's the people of this province. It's small business, and we're here to support them, to support their families and their loved ones, and create those conditions. And so I know, I'm looking forward to seeing how we entered the pandemic, which was the largest job creator in the nation, more manufacturing jobs, and we'll get right back to that.
Well, exactly, and that's it. And our province is such a great province in the terms of, like you mentioned, you have Indigenous nations in your riding. You have a major stretch of the 401 going through your riding sort of idea with the Big Apple, and you have so many different communities, like you said, bigger than Belgium. That's I've never heard that expression before, but I will definitely use that now when I talk about the great work that David Piccini and in Northumberland, Peterborough is working on and how he represents it. And I think that it's good to remember that we can go back to the way things used to be, and that government will get out of our lives, our everyday lives. We need to remember that it may not be favorable now, but government will go back to the way it used to be, and your government will go back to fighting for what's right and trying to lower that deficit, that the 15 years of liberal government. I mean, when the 2018 election was, I was 14 years old. And so it had occurred to me that in my whole life, especially my life of remembering it, I've only ever experienced a liberal government. And I was glad to sort of see a change and sort of see that
Yeah.
new change in government and see Premier Ford join. And that kind of goes into our next question. And we know during the pandemic, like we said, there's more government in our lives, and it's been very hard for people, especially people that are tired of the same old things. And a lot of people stepped away from the PC party and stepped away from Premier Ford. And unfortunately, it's inevitable. And of course, you can't please everybody. But we want to ask, the OHSCA team asks, what must the Ontario PC party do in order to draw back voters who may have lost faith in the party during the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, I mean, that's an excellent question. And this is, you're always balancing the needs of, once you get elected, you're not just accountable to your party members and your party, you're accountable to everybody you represent. And it's balancing those, the diversity of those needs. And without question, I know many who believe in smaller governments, many conservatives, without question, elements of our base were frustrated with the heavy hand of government that's been needed to guide through the pandemic and keep Ontarians safe. But to get them back, I mean, it's getting back to our message, talking about the economy, talking about what this looks like, because this pandemic is not in perpetuity. This is, we want our lives back. We've got a cautious, safe plan to get us there. Let's not forget, I mean, Ontario, after 15 years of Liberal government, it's not just the government, it's the structures of government, it's the arms of government, it's the association. It's deeply, deeply ingrained. And so to change that and to change to provide a more responsive healthcare system that's more community oriented, to really a fundamental, even the news releases. My predecessor always said, we have created these jobs. And I always was blown away by that. I've never once said that. It's not us that create these jobs. We create the conditions. So this fundamental change from the belief that heavy hand of government is what's needed, and to create jobs. And so I think it's emerging from this, it's taking a step back. It's pushing and pulling various levers to look at getting out of the way. Things like, we've worked on rural opportunities incentives to incentivize companies to invest in rural Ontario, creating the backbone for broadband. I'm not creating that business. What I'm doing is creating the conditions. So an achiever, someone that wants to market their product to the world, has the tools to do that. And so again, largest broadband commitment in the nation, not by a federal government, by the provincial. And today, as I remembered and we mourned the 215 lost children in Kamloops. I think to staying true to the principles of reconciliation. And honestly, Vincenzo, it's more than words. It's more than tears and platitudes. It's listening. It's, I go and what I have a comfortable relationship with Chief Carr, for example, where I was today, to be able to not be embarrassed to say what I don't know, and to learn and to listen and to take from the teachings. She's taught me quite a great deal, and let this be Indigenous led, and to work with our Indigenous communities on job creations. These are moms and dads. These are communities that very much want, the same things as we do in the rest of the riding, and it's about working together. And I've so enjoyed that working relationship. So I think going forward, whether you're Conservative, Liberal, NDP, Green, really doesn't matter. I think we all together want to emerge from COVID stronger than before. And to get a bit partisan with you, I think the PCs are the best positioned to guide us. And that's, to get back to your question, how we appeal to the base on those fundamentals, on limited government, on creating the conditions for job creation, on getting out of your way, reducing red tape, reducing regulation, supporting our youth in universities and colleges, and micro-credential strategy. These are all the things that will appeal to Conservatives and to all Ontarians, to be frank.
Well, you made a couple good points there, and I'll get to the Indigenous conversation in a bit. I do want to have that conversation with you, as you have so many experiences. But I think what we need to remember is that the Conservative Party, the Progressive Conservative Party, is the only party we are governing. Your government is governing already, and they're the only government, the only party suitable. I mean, people may look at the PC party and say, oh, they had my vote last time, but not anymore because of XYZ COVID restrictions, or I don't like how this is happening or that happening. But we look at the other parties. Is the NDP under Andrew Horwath really going to be any better? Is the Liberals under Stephen Del Duca, who is a win relic, I've heard that term before, who they could have gone forward and chosen someone else and revitalized the party, but they chose someone just as incompetent as Kathleen Wynne to lead them again? No. So that's why we need to remember that the Conservative Party, the Progressive Conservatives, are the only good party to run our province at this moment and next year.
I think it's about competing ideas, and I respect my opponents, but I genuinely, as you said, do believe that when you start looking at the contrast, you're right. This is someone who was an architect of much of Kathleen Wynne's failed policies in this province, policies that inspired someone like myself to run. That's not to say that everything they did, deserves condemnation. I've worked actually with Kathleen Wynne on, elements of the Indigenous file, and greatly respect some of the work that's been done. But fundamentally speaking, the monolith to gluttony and failure and entitlement with some of these green energy contracts in my own riding, and driving by them every day and seeing frustrated farmers, including one that I wasn't able to support. This was early on in my mandate. I'll never forget that, and I'm frustrated. I'm still angry about it, and what the Liberals did in rural communities like mine. And we know what they would have done. They would have been beholden, exclusively to unions, akin to the NDP. We would have seen longer school closures. We know that their answer to pandemic was trying to force political issues like paid sick days that are without question essential. And we worked with the federal government to roll out a program. What they would have done is just put it on the backs of small businesses in perpetuity. It wasn't time limited. It would have taken what was one of already the best and most progressive plans in North America and taken us from here to here, and punish small businesses at a very difficult time. And we know that the approach that really sent them to independent party status was not working. So we're localizing healthcare. We're investing in micro-credentials. They don't have a monopoly over anything, especially in education. And I'm really proud to say we've expanded OSAP eligibility. I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with our Indigenous institutes, working alongside them, I should say, partners in this. These Indigenous institutes, a cultural sensitive learning, expanding OSAP eligibility for it, micro-credentials, first in Canada strategy, expanding OSAP for 600 micro-credential courses so that people can earn and learn at the same time. And the freezing of tuition, putting students first, not the beholden exclusively again to administrations, but forcing administrations, and sometimes tough love is what's needed, and saying to them, look, you can't on the backs of students continue to every year jack up tuition. Sometimes you have to look within. You have to look with how you're governing this campus, this institution. And so putting students first, a free speech on campus. So there's so many things we're really proud of. Skilled trades. And we can't squeeze it into a half hour.
That's exactly it. And before we go on to our last segment, I just want to quickly touch on before what you were saying about the Indigenous relations in the province of Ontario. And like you said, you have lots of experience of working with the Indigenous people alongside them since a little bit before your election, but since you've been elected, and you have that opportunity to work alongside them in your community since you have some nations inside your constituency. And I think it's important that you touched on a great point about reconciliation is working alongside them, learning about what they need to say and incorporating that in. And that is really something to remember and a goal to go forward with, and recognize that the Indigenous population should have as much of a say as everybody else, and that they should be equal with us and working with us so we can work to create a better, prosperous Ontario for every single person in the province.
Yeah, it's never about us without us is the slogan I learned at the Royal College.
So the last segment is called Advice for the Next Generation, and we go through this segment with every single one of our guests that come on the show. You're our 21st guest. So we speak of young conservatives and how they can get involved. So we like to ask everybody, what do you think that young high school conservatives can do in order to get more politically active? And what is one piece of advice you would give them?
So to get more active, I would say organize and be proud of who you are and your views on campus. I find, especially for conservatives, you have to have a thick skin. Developed it as an MPP, and it's not to shy away, because in many respects, our feelings are shared by the silent majority of Ontarians in this province, and so it's to speak up and don't be silenced. Often, especially those on the far left will try and silence you, try and go after you as an individual using ad hominem attacks to silence you. I mean, we saw it in the legislature. Very legitimate questions about intellectual property research with respect to China was labeled a racist if you ask those sorts of questions. And I think actually we can turn this upside down, and as conservatives be an inclusive and welcoming party. We have a lot of work to do as a party to continue to grow, to attract new members, but the constant segregation that I see with other parties and their viewpoints, constantly focusing and obsessing over our differences. And that's not to say that we don't need to acknowledge, understand those less fortunate, those that are disadvantaged. Without question, we do. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe in equality of opportunity and working hard to create those conditions. So my message is to be proud, be loud, and stay engaged and active and organize and get involved. If I'm to leave you with one advice, it's to reach out to any politician at any level, but specifically for young conservatives, reach out to your MPPs in whatever riding, get involved. You learn so much. And it's not there's a tendency to want to get right involved in policy and drafting things. And the best and most enriching things I do that lead to policy are just conversations at the doors. Knock on doors, support your local candidates, and get involved today, and do it loud and do it proud, and build the sort of conservative party that you want to see, a progressive conservative party in this province. That's, I think, very inclusive. I think that doesn't obsess over what separates us, but understands and acknowledges it, but also brings people together and moves on for a better and more prosperous province.
Exactly. And that is a great note to end on. Just get involved and do what is right, and focus on what brings us together and not separates us, and fight for what you think is right. And whether you're a conservative that will support our party next election, or even if you're from another party, just get involved and do what you think is right, and focus on what unites us, and don't over obsess over what divides us. So thank you, David, for joining us today. We really appreciate you being with us, and we thank you for everything that you have done in your community. And we thank you for joining us, and we wish you well in the future next year in the election. It's just a short 11 months away from the time of this premiere, this video, the day that we're posting it. So it really is something to work forward. And that is it. We hope you enjoyed today's interview. You can look for more videos coming soon. Make sure to follow our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok accounts at Ontario HS Cons for more info about our next interview. And for more great content, make sure to look at our websites, ontariohsconservatives.org, so you can see everything that we're doing and all the info that you would possibly need about our group. And make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss another video. And we hope to see you all soon. Thanks for joining us today.